something was due?
Yeah, this, I know we're doing critique on Wednesday, but then, would you want it done?
So here's where we are. Week 8. How many of you will be ready for your critique on Wednesday? Okay. Your visual designs are due by the end of week 8. Liz?
Yeah. Have them due at the end of week 9.
No, it's too much.
Oh, have them beginning of the week. Can you just use English words and I'll know what you're trying to
It's
say?
Memorial Day, the beginning of the week, still in class.
Thank you. Oh, I guess.
Wednesday of week 9. 3 visual designs posted to your client staging area page like this. Okay, I want to be able to see them, so let's pick on Chris because he loves that.
Do you want a screenshot of posted?
Yeah, let me let's pick on Chris because he loves it. Visual design studies. Ah, he did it that way, didn't he? Well, I can still see this, right? So if you want to do it as a PDF, that's fine. I will accept it like that. However, I'd much prefer it where I can click and look at it in a browser screen like this, right? So like what I did for Jet City was, God, I hate these, was I could click on it and see a full length JPEG like that. But then if I zoomed in on it, I could see what it looked like this. That's how I'd prefer it done, right? If you want to do it as a multi-page PDF that you're linking to, I can still see it and I will get over it. Just know that I don't like that. But it works, right? So Wednesday. Week 9. Okay, so
Instead of this one.
correct. That those better be posted and they better be fleshed out, all 3 of them. So Liz, let's use you as an example, right? So Liz came to me and had her critique, right? Where she had 3 designs that were about 50%-ish done.
75.
Okay.
Go on.
Sorry. So now your job, Liz, is not just to do one that looks fantastic. Your job is to take our, yeah, look at the face that you just made, is to take the feedback that I gave you and make all 3 of them look fantastic. Okay, I want 3 directions. I almost flipped somebody off, didn't I? Except I used this finger instead. Okay? So I want 3 directions that are fully fleshed out like this. This is 3 directions that is fully fleshed out, right? So for instance, Liz, the talking about the logo and the downfalls of what you had and that kind of stuff. So don't just do one that has it complete, do all 3 of them that has it complete, Make sense? Is that?
The 300 pages.
What?
We only have to have 3 though, right? And we only have to do like a home page. It doesn't have, because she there has.
Home and main.
We have to, so we have to have 6 pages?
Correct. Yes. So it's a good thing you have till next Wednesday. You're welcome, Liz. It's not. So you must complete at least 3 visual design solutions for your home page and 1 main page, total of 6 pages. By mixing and matching typography, color, and imagery treatments on top of your content wireframes. Right? Because this is supposed to mimic what you would potentially show to a client. Right? And if you showed them 3 things that weren't really fully fleshed out, they're gonna say, hey, maybe I'm not gonna hire you again. Right? I'm not trying to be a jerk, but that's just kind of the way it is. Make sense? Okay, so given that, let's go to WEB200. Open with. Really? Did open with just not work? Open with? Does anything work on these computers?
No.
Seriously. For you guys as students, do these computers actually work for you guys?
I don't use the computer in
Adobe Illustrator. Because, you know, I don't know how many more emails I can send to them about things that, I mean, for instance, how many Firefox aliases do we need? Do you really need, I mean, really? Okay, so as this is opening, and again, this is being recorded because I'm going to get into some code today. Okay. Let's say it like this. How many of you hate me because of the visual design assignment requirements? Show of hands. I'd expect more than just Liz, right? Thanks for listening to me. Wait, thanks for being honest, Liz, and thanks for listening, Analia.
I'm being honest too, I wasn't.
Right. The joke is past. I said, how many of you guys hate me for the visual design requirements? And Liz raised her hand and nobody else did. And then you said, what? Okay. So today what we're going to talk about is building an HTML template from your Master Arts, page layout for your web page, visual design for your web page, using the 960 grid website to create a responsive design, make your website responsive. As well, I'm going to talk about a toggle menu using jQuery because I'm really trying to convince you guys to write your own code. I don't know how else to say it. I'm really trying to squash the copy and paste culture here and get you guys to write your own code. Okay? So, building an HTML template for Master Art. This lecture was a lecture from a long time ago in terms of how to basically take a visual design and make a template out of it. Now, this is an old lecture, but you know, pre-responsive design lecture. but the theories on how I build this in terms of HTML structure and CSS elements, etc., right, breaking up the page, are still the same. Where things differ in this lecture to how we do them now is when it comes to CSS backgrounds, okay? But if we look at this design here, how could you describe this design? I want to say be nice, but okay. Let's just,
Colorful.
yeah, I see all of you guys going. Simple, normal. Hey, look, that looks like a lot of stuff that's out there already, right? In other words, where we have a header color, we have a navigation color, we have a footer color, we have a content area that's white, we have text, we have a sidebar that is sub-navigation. Right? In other words, do I think this visual design is exciting? If I came to this visual design and needed to read some content, would I be able to read some content? Yes. Okay. But in terms of then how this is built, right?
Who's printing bad? I'm just kidding.
Is it you? Who is it? I'll go over there and see who it is.
I hope it's Miller from his class.
Hi, Gloria. You have a stapler?
She doesn't want to interrupt you.
Thanks for turning that in, Gloria. So, back in the day, being able to then export from Illustrator into Photoshop, if we still need background images, in other words, what the fuck are you doing? Can I just, okay. So let's say that you need that background file there. How many of you have the need for background images in your designs at all? Okay, a few of you guys. So it's still the same where what you might want to do is, if you need that image back there, right, as a background file, you might want to do a couple of different things. One is that, again, if you need, let's go to where this lives on the interwebs. The downfall of using CSS3 is that you can't just say, view background image. DBP. Source. Okay. So let's say you need a background image like this. Now, you may want to save it as a PNG. Or these days we can start using scalable vector graphics, SVGs. Okay? How many of you have used SVGs yet? Okay, remember we did that in typography class. Okay? So if you want to use, it may or may not be something that you've covered extensively yet, right? But if you want to use SVGs as background images, for instance, this little registration mark right there is an SVG as a background image, okay? So if I inspect that then, right, you can actually use SVGs like this, right? So if I did view page source and we went images, see if I can look at my images folder. I can't. Regmark SVG, right? So when you're using scalable vector graphics as background files, the one thing that you do have to do is, unlike using a PNG image, well, let's just say it like this. What is the width and height of this file right here, this SVG image? Correct. I'm not actually making a joke. It doesn't have one. Okay? In other words, if I save this out of Illustrator, its height and width are determined by, seriously, if I can grab this corner. Come on, let me grab it. But I want to grab it from the bottom over there. I want to grab it seriously. There we go. Jeez, man. There. So in other words, that file is how big its containing element is. Okay? So, right? I know, come on. Have you been in a class with you guys? Okay, so what I would have to do then is give a background size. So, in other words, if I want that element to be 30 by 30, right, I would have to specify it to be 30 by 30, or it is going to fill up the containing element or be as big as its containing element, right? So if header is however big header is, right, it's going to attempt to, just like a responsive graphic that you said width 100%, it's going to attempt to fill that containing element, just like this one right here, where this footer image, right, I have not said how big or tall or et cetera it should be. So because then I haven't set a height or a width to it, thanks for being there for me, Jess. I appreciate that. All right. Hey, Jess, thanks for not printing while I'm talking. Appreciate that. I could give it a background size. Okay. Now it's 25 pixels. Okay. So SVGs are wicked awesome. So if I had to do this one over again, right, I would have used an SVG in that background there. okay? So if I wanted to then use that SVG as a background, okay? If I were to want to make that as a PNG file, what I would do is I would turn off the layers that are currently blocking it, okay? And I could save this as a PNG file straight out of Illustrator. Save it for Web Legacy. How about you just let me to do what I want? Save it as a PNG file, crop it however I need to, right? As a background file. The other option is what they were suggesting, export for screens, okay? So what this is going to do is, this is going to allow me to name the artboard, right? So if I wanted to do this, if I wanted to get that as an SVG, here's what I might do instead. I'll just name it something stupid. Because now the way Illustrator is having you guys save graphics out of Illustrator, the artboard size. So if I saved this as another image, trying not to swear. I'm trying not to swear as much in class. But Lisa, if you're watching this video, this is why I swear in class. Be nice if things worked. do you unswitch the? If I wanted that city as background, then I would save as, I'll do big BG city, not EPS, regular Illustrator file. Okay, so now BG city, and this is where then I can get rid of a lot of the extra layers that I don't need, okay? As well, then, because it's going to want to save an SVG with the name of the artboard. And if you have stuff like this, right, that is vector graphics, I really, really suggest that you start using SVGs, right? How many of you have really started exploring that as an option since you learned it in the typography class, okay? Like I said, when I redid my site and I used SVGs on it, and they look sharp. They look really, really nice. Okay, so now if I then want to take this, okay, and I want to basically open up the artboards, which should be open artboard, right? Let's rename this Skyline, okay? And if I want to resize this artboard, I can grab the artboard tool here, right? Have it come down all the way to where it's white, like that, okay? And this is where then I can say export for screens. And so when you're exporting for screens, right, if you have multiple artboards, I don't have the file that I did all of my icons with, but in terms of this, all these icons right here, I had in one Illustrator file on multiple artboards. So I just exported for artboards, and since each artboard was named, it allowed me to just use that name. So I'm going to want to export to, for the time being, let's just put it in WEB200. I'll probably move it here in a bit because I'll put it into a file for you guys to see. I can then say SVG, okay, export artboard, and now that has been exported into my WEB200 folder as skyline.svg, okay? So going back to then this lecture. So that's how I would do this slicing and optimizing stuff today, right? Now, again, we are in the day and age where we are relying less and less on background files, right? In our CSS, a lot of times we can get away with just colors, etc., right? But why we used to do background files the way we did was if we take a look at, for instance, this one, header GIF, okay? This was back in the day where we had to actually put the drop shadow into the art file, where now we can just put a drop shadow on our office element or our elements using CSS, okay? So long gone are these days. However, that being said, in terms of a layout like this, right? I'm still using this layout right here, and I'll tell you why. And you guys are probably expecting me to tell you why, because I'm teaching you class, right? Horizontal area, horizontal area, horizontal area, horizontal area. So, I have a big gripe. With, as much as I think the Duckett book is great, what did I name it as? What did I name it as? There it is, HTML, page 431, sorry. This layout is wrong. Okay. Why is it wrong? Yes, there's two main areas why it's wrong.
Well, it's not HTML5.
Okay, that doesn't bother me. Let's say it like this. Can we agree that this is a modern layout that you may be using? Okay. True? What's wrong here? Div ID page. Why do we need a wrapper all the way around? What's it used for?
CSS.
Back in the day, a lot of people did this. If they wanted to, in other words, and for those of you that are watching this at home, I'm drawing on the board. Okay? So if we have a browser window, and in the browser window, we then wanted things to be a width of, I don't know, 980, right? I never subscribed to the theory of put a containing element all the way around there to contain a max width, okay? But that's why a lot of people use the page wrapper. True. Okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay?
Why not?
What's going on here?
Header the width of the page.
So therefore, the wrapper would do what?
Oh, so you're specifically saying around the entire page?
Correct. Right? So the page wrapper, by default, is going all the way out to the edges, rendering it useless for controlling the width, because the width is all the way out to the edge, right? Instead, what is going on here is so let's say this is the browser. Okay? What is going on here is something like this. The navigation area is going all the way out to the edges. But the main navigation element only goes out so far, right? There we go. Right? See what I mean? How do we get that element to sit inside of the containing element? In other words, if I needed this to sit centered inside of that other element, how do I do it? Correct. Okay. So how I've started seeing things over the years, or when I first started doing this kind of layout stuff, how I saw all the elements instead was not a wrapper around it, okay, because I've always thought to myself, well, okay, that's useful if you have a background image that you want to use it, but, well, let's get back to the other one. What else is wrong with this here? How is div ID content sitting left and sidebar sitting right? Okay, great. So notice, if your page ID then, let's say we had a wrapper on the page. So let's say on this drawing, let's say this was page. And I floated this one left and floated that one right. What's going to happen? Right. This is going to float all the way out there, and this is going to float all the way out there. You need a containing, yeah. You're getting to why I build things the certain way I do. So I've always seen that the container or wrapper, what's the function of a container or a wrapper? Or contain floated elements. Yeah, okay. So to contain floated elements. So therefore, that renders, unfortunately, okay, I love you, I love this book. However, this graphic should have never made it in this book because it was absolutely wrong. Okay. Can everybody see whether you agree with me or not? Can everybody please see my rationale?
Well, isn't the div ID page the thing that's speaking of the items?
Correct. So if div ID page is going to allow this navigation to come all the way out, because how are you going to get that color to come all the way out to the edges? How are you going to get this image to come all the way out to the edges? Does that make sense? In other words, if we put page ID all the way around it, that container is coming out to here. So if there's things in here that we want to contain, our only option is to draw a container around those elements, give it a max width, right, to contain it. So therefore, how I see a page built is completely, not completely different, but here's my page build instead. So, if you're wondering, hey Mike, how do I build that? This class that I teach up at UW, the HCD 532 class, it's starts out at setting up your server space to creating your first web page. Yay, I can write p tags and stuff. To page layout for your web page. So how I see the world being built is like this. Everything is in horizontal planes, right? So header, navigation, main, footer. Okay, so if we actually look at this then, and again, this is not responsive because when we were building desktop. Okay, header, navigation, content, footer. Each one of those then has a width, because if you don't give it a width, it's a block level element. If you don't give a block level element a width, it will go all the way out to the edge. Okay? Margin 0 auto that keeps it in the center, or right and left auto that keeps it in the center. 0 is just top and bottom in this case, right? Border black, I'm just showing you guys something in space. Padding 20, so this is where I'm using the original box model, not the box sizing border box model. Who has used the box sizing border box model? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay. How many of you have used Bootstrap? So our default box model, if I said width 940, it takes up 940 of space. If I said padding 20 left and right, I'm still keeping a width of 940, right? Because padding left and right is adding to the overall visual width. That's the default box model. If we use the Bootstrap box model, or not the Bootstrap box model, but the box model that Bootstrap uses, box sizing border box, it doesn't add the 20 pixels of padding, right? So if I want it to be 980 with 20 pixels of padding, right, I would have to say 980, 20 pixels of padding. This box model has really become the standard box model because of responsive imagery. Meaning, oh, this one doesn't have it in there. So this one isn't as tight as the other one because this is the one that I do on the fly in class that they build with me, and then I have the demo. So here, if I inspect this, right, this image is a max width of 100%. So meaning it comes out to that 620 mark, right? So if well, it's actually, sorry. Wrong dock side. this image right here, okay? So if I go to content and I turn right on, right? See how that image comes directly to that grid line?
Yes.
Where's Anthony when I need him?
That's true.
Right.
He needs to be in his class.
So if I now inspect this image, right? If I said max width 100%, padding, border, look at it. Oh. I said I wasn't going to swear, but
It plays better.
right. So what I've done is, if I had it to do all over again, I would switch to the new box sizing border box model. However, because I've started things the old way and all I need really to adhere to the new box model is imagery so that I can say 100% and then padding and border is on the inside, right? Does that make sense? That's where to use this box model. Did you have a question, Liz? It looked like you started it.
Like, so that instead of set style,
Yes. Do you understand the box model?
just that when you add padding, that adds to the actual width, right? That's what you're saying. If you say an image is 100 pixels wide, and
100%. We're talking percentages there. So let me backtrack. The box model. Content, padding, border, margin. Okay? Padding, border, and margins go on the outside of the content. So if I said content is 940, padding was 20, and padding was 20, this line right here is 980 now. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's where then content, 940, 20 pixels padding, 1 pixel, right? So if I took the padding off, it takes it off the width, right? So that's how you understand the box model, right? Then there is the box model that Bootstrap will use. So by saying box sizing, border box, width, or the padding out of the width. So now, width 940, padding 20, you see how it's taken it out of here? So if I then said box model, box sizing, border box, I would have to specify 980 to get it to sit out there. And you can see the slight discrepancy here with the borders, right? Does that make sense? So when it comes to then imagery, right? If we're taking pixels and borders out of the width, then if we said 100% plus padding plus border, it is going to go over our targets right there. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're left with calculating the padding and the border as a percentage and saying width 98%, right? Which I have done before I knew about this box model. Did you think it was fun? No, it was not fun. You should see my notebook of me trying to calculate this page. Yeah. Maybe I finally did, let's see. I think what I had to do was like on the images, maybe I changed it, but yeah, I had to do a lot of calculating of the border and the padding and et cetera, and it was a nightmare. Then I found the box sizing border box, and I was like, oh my God, that's great.
So you just put box size count on every box and then.
I use the box sizing border box for images because images need to flex, right?
It's just for responsive.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So now getting back to then, why don't we use this page thing here and how are we then going to get something? So in other words, I really recommend that you use this type of a layout, right? You don't use a page wrapper because every time I see a page wrapper, a little bit inside of me dies. Does. It really does, okay? And start seeing things in horizontal space like that. So what happens if you want a navigation box to come all the way out?
Could you?
A div all the way around everything. A little piece of me dies inside every time I see a student do that. Because if we want things to come all the way out to the edges, having a page wrapper all the way around is useless. It's just it becomes an empty div tag, essentially, okay?
But you don't need like a div that's
No. I'm talking about all the way on the outside. Okay? Yep. This. Specifically, this. All the way around. So instead, what I would recommend, right, is to start building like this. Okay? So if you're building like this, the answer then, or the question becomes, okay, Mike, well, how did you get that footer color to go all the way out? Wow, man, I hate what you guys did here. Seriously, I can't take it. You guys have screwed up this site so bad. So then the question becomes, if you have one of these mega footer things, right, that you want this to sit in the center, but you want that color to come all the way out, how are you going to do that? Okay. So if I inspect this, footer, right? There it is, footer menu. 940, margin right, left, auto, padding 20, right? So that's the text. But how did I get the color to go all the way out to the outside? Just a separate div with nothing more than a color. Now I did margin top and bottom because I wanted it to sneak up under there and a padding bottom, right? But just by having a div around it, right? So in other words, if I wanted to oops. So while this is opening, let me just close some of my tabs that I've opened up. Son of a bitch. I hate you guys. Should I quit? Huh? What? But I'm still lecturing, man. Seriously, it's rude. You guys. Well, I'm lecturing. To put it like that. If I open this, right? So here it is, locally, right? So if I want then to have a navigation that comes all the way out, right? So currently my navigation is 940, padding 20 left and right, solid black. Right? So let's say then I wanted to have something come all the way around. Simply and this is where I'd say navigation container. So if I save that, and then said, how about you just not tab it over for me? How about that? So background color black. That's all I have to do. Because again, it is a block level element, right, that by nature is going to go all the way out to as far as it can go. Make sense? Okay. So if I wanted then that design on both my footer and my navigation, bang. This navigation here is still a width margin auto, right? So it'll sit in the center of whatever element it is trying to sit in the middle of, right? Same thing. If I wanted to say, You would think you're going to Chrome if you're clicking here. You would think. Yeah. But that takes you to Chrome. And it's not going all the way down to the bottom because there's not enough content to push it down there. But that's how you can get those pieces going out there, right? And again, this is where on the middle then, or content in this case, then I have floated left, floated right, and a containing one around it so that they don't, has anybody ever had this right here try to float up next to the navigation? Put a container around it. It won't do that, right? Or this is where on, anytime you have things that are floated, right? That's where you need to clear those floats where you do the overflow hidden. Otherwise, things will try to float up like that. That's called the Great Collapse. Okay. How many of you know about that? Did you guys do that stuff in 120?
The margins crunch.
What?
The margins all collapse.
This is where if I don't have, in other words, if I don't have overflow hidden, right? The background of the, so if I turn that off, right, and here, turn that off, navigation, oops, that's why. Color container, right? That's where the main content won't, its box will not render all the way around. See how the footer tries to come up like that? And here's the box, right? That's called the Great Collapse. So if we look the lecture, it does that. This. That's what I'm talking about. So in other words, you have to clear. So you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. So I would really encourage you guys to go that route for layout. So again, if we wanted to put that SVG image in your background, same as like using regular PNG. Because the file was not found because I changed the name. Oops. Damn it. That's not what I want to do. Okay. Find, you know, right. Look how nice and clear the SVGs are starting to look. Right. Make sense? Okay. Now, when it comes to being responsive, here's how I adapt. So I'm still building desktop down instead of mobile first. Okay? Desktop down, mobile first, doesn't really matter to me. Okay? I get what people are saying about you should go simple to more complex, right? That's fine, right? However, I've come to a layout that has, like I said, header, navigation, content area, text, sidebar, etc. Right? So in terms of then, how savvy do you guys feel like in terms of building something responsive? Are you guys? Not very, Liz? Okay. So what I recommend is as much as I have encouraged you to look at this page layout, right? But also encourage you to look at, well, let's just say it like this. In my WEB200 schedule, instead of, so I'm going to close those, instead of rewriting this lecture, right? I've left it just for kind of, this is how we used to do those things, and this is how we still do them. And then make your website responsive, okay, is the other lecture from the 532 class, okay? If you want to see a roadmap of, oh, how does Mike build stuff? You want a real snapshot, Web 110, Web 120 compressed snapshot. That's what this class basically is. How to start from writing a P tag to having a website load that is fully responsive. Okay, so if you are interested in watching those videos, right, that's the class that I teach up at UW in the winters. From here's how to log into your server, to this is a P tag, to this is how you put elements around things, to putting in a flex slider, writing your own toggle menu, how to make include files, etc. Next week, I'm going to do includes and some PHP stuff in here as a demo, right? But here's the gist of what I'm talking about in terms of making your website responsive, okay? First, you guys know about here in other words, I'm assuming that you guys have already learned this in Web 120, right? But sometimes things are different, and I just need to make sure that you guys know certain principles. Viewport meta tag. You guys know what that is? What it does? So let me ask you, Nicole, what do you think the viewport meta tag does? Correct. Why? What does it actually do? Okay. The viewport meta tag will, yes, recognize devices. Okay. But more importantly, it recognizes the viewport. What is the viewport? Okay, so how many pixels are in this viewport? Let me ask it to you this way. I have an iPhone 5. How many pixels are in this viewport? 320 by 568. Is that right? What?
I'm getting 1136 by 640.
Correct. What?
326. Yeah.
Correct. So if I said, how many pixels are across vertically like this, your answer is?
540.
Why does it say 320 there?
It's taking into account I'm not sure.
So pixel density is different than viewport. Okay? So what I can tell, and nobody's ever told me this, nor have I ever read it, but by observational data that I am seeing, the viewport takes that pixel density and converts it to 72 pixels per inch. Therefore, at 72 pixels per inch, we have 320 pixels across. Okay? So what we've been working with on monitors for a long time is 72 pixels per inch, right? So that's your default viewport. Does that make sense? So what you have to tell the web page is to look at the device's viewport and present accordingly, right? Does that make sense? So that's what the viewport meta tag does. So if I am then at 837, notice that right there says how many pixels across, calculating the viewport. So the viewport is always 72 pixels per inch, so far as Mike's and Kula's eyes can tell, right? Does that make sense, Nicole? So that's what the viewport is, okay? So step one, make sure you have your viewport meta tag in there. And again, I'm not going to build this on the fly. You can see the videos. I'm assuming that you guys have done a lot of this. Typography responsive, okay? So this is where we've somewhat gone over pixels, right? Where what we would want to do then is start making, making your typography responsive to me is kind of an oxymoron. Meaning, does your typography actually respond like an image does, right? An image will scale. Does your type actually scale like that? Huh? It could, right? But it typically does not. So basically what we're doing is we are changing from pixels to ems. Let's just get over it and move on with our world, okay? So how many of you love pixels? You don't? According to the, what's that guy's book? Ethan Marcotte, right? He's the one that coined responsive website. According to Ethan Marcotte, you put body font size 100%. This will set your M square to 16 pixels. Okay. So from there, everything is in reference to 16 pixels. So if I had something that was 36 pixels, 36 divided by 16 is now 2.25 EMs.
So for iPhone screens, it's running under the assumption that we're working with 72.
Yes, if you say viewports.
The viewport is.
The viewport is. Now, if you turn your phone wide like this, it's going to resize really funnily, unless you put the HTML don't resize thing in. Mean it. No, so if we go to this one lecture here, which is the original lecture I wrote for this class for responsive, this. So, really, why do people delete stuff on the internet? So if you don't want on your iPhone, when you turn your phone landscape like this, if you don't want the text to get bigger like they want it to, you're going to have to put this in there. Don't adjust the text size, just leave it alone. Okay? Confident on using M's like this, everybody? Great. Making your images responsive. This is where then, if I want to make my image a max width of 100% and height auto, this is then where I should use that box model that we were talking about, if I have padding and borders on the inside. Make sense? Okay. So far, everybody's with me on this. Great. Making your layout responsive. I have my own way of doing things. You can do things how you see fit, right? How I do things is on the containing elements. So yes, my header, my navigation, my content, my footer are all container elements, right? They're containing floated items. So if I want to go back here, right? If I had a logo that was to the left and I had some menu items and stuff over here, that header then would be containing those floated items. Or even if they are display inline items, right, it is still containing them. These may be floated, these may be done with display inline block. I prefer doing display inline block on my list items in my navigation and display block on the A tags. That gives me a better result. Okay? Not display inline, but display inline block. So you can put a block level A tag inside it. Everybody knows that trick? Yes, no? See, this is why I go through the checklist. I don't know what you guys know. Again, the middle or content area is a containing element, right? So because it has something floated left and floated right. So what I typically do then is, if I was working from a static pixel layout, which we're not really doing a whole lot anymore because everything is going to be responsive eventually, instead of using then width 940, 980, whatever, use max width. Okay? So at below 1024, because if I have a max width of 980, right? Below 1024 is where things are going to start to kind of respond. Okay? That's where then I will have, right? If I have a max width on a parent element, then on the children elements, that's where we need to calculate the percentages. Okay? So the math kind of goes like this. If I have, again, I'm building this to the 960 grid. Okay? So according to the 960 grid, this right here to that right there is 940. If I add 20 pixels of padding, it's 980. So I try to be consistent in how I've built my stuff using the 960 grid with the 980 outside, 940 inside, right? So if you look at my stuff, it should be relatively consistent. So therefore, if I want this to start collapsing in and respond, okay, the math goes like this, according to the Ethan Marcotte book. Who knows the Ethan Marcotte book that I'm talking about? This one. This is the one, this is the book that described, this is where responsive design, that term was coined. It was not Donald Trump, he did not coin that term. The only term he's ever coined is priming the pump. That's totally his. Thank you very much.
He's like Father Genius.
Dude, he's so happy. I'm so happy he's president. I mean, look at Mrs. face right now. She's just excited. So therefore, then, if this is a 620 column, this is 300. 620 divided by 940, 300 divided by 940, 65.9531.91. Why am I not dividing this by 980? Because of the padding. Because the actual content area is 940. If you wanted to calculate padding, 20 divided by 980. Okay,
If you don't do that, then the padding will always be.
correct. Right? I don't think making your padding percentage is a good idea. I would leave it 20 out there. Maybe change it to 10 for phones, right? But I would still have that. Right? Now, if you wanted gutters, all right, this gutter right here will remain 20 pixels because I calculated that width and that width. But what if you had 12 columns that you wanted the column to flex, but not the gutter? Who can tell me how to do that? Who understands what I'm talking about? In other words, if we look at my column structure up there, the columns are flexing, but the gutters are not. Does that make sense? So how do I keep the gutters fixed like that? Well, flexing the columns. Let's say it like this. If we have four columns, and we want this to flex, but we don't want that to flex. True, but if this is an element, that this gutter is not an element. This gutter is actually a margin on this element. So this element actually,
It's hard to go to the market.
you guys are going to think I'm Jesus. Width, 25% minus 20 pixels. Yeah, width, calc, 25 minus 20. So here's the thing. If I have then margin right, margin right, margin right, oh, margin right. Huh?
Big chart and stuff.
No. Nth child has never worked for me, right? Especially if you need things to repeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, right? Here's the trick. Again, you ready? So if I go to, let's just say videos, right? And we're not going to get to the toggle menus today, unfortunately. But if I have 20%, 20%, 20%, and then 20%, right? And I want them to, you know, right?
You need 20 pixels.
Yes, I did. Okay. So if we inspect this, right, that element, right, you can watch the calc. 50, 33, 25. So 20, 20, 20. There is 20 here. Margin right 20. But on its parent element, margin right minus 20. So that if we are at fixed widths, you don't get it wrapping down like that. Yeah, on its parent element, you say margin right minus 20. I stumbled across that. I don't know how. I thought I was making something up. It's always worked. And then Thomas Wilburn was like, oh yeah, I've seen that trick before. And I'm like, no, but I made that up. Yeah, it works. Yeah, it works. I don't know exactly why, but basically it's, I don't know what it's voodoo is happening, but it totally works. And I use that trick all the time, right? For stuff that needs to zigzag down like that. Okay, lastly, let's talk about the toggle menu, all right? What is a toggle menu? What's happening? What is happening here? Describe it to me in pseudocode. Yes. On click, show. On click, hide. Right? Display none. Display block. Display none. So let me show you old school JavaScript. We're not going to get through it. Let me show you old school JavaScript next time. Here's what I really would like to encourage you guys to do. Right? Start there. Show and hide, show and hide, show and hide, show and hide. Right? So if we view page source then, when I click on that hamburger thing, that's the ID of toggle, function, go get element by ID, navigation, perform toggle. This is all there is to that. Now, you're going to need more conditions than that. In other words, what happens if I open it and hide it? Oh, where'd my navigation go? Navigation, totally. Okay, raise your hand and say, I will not tell them. Do it. I count on this as an example. I will not tell them. Oh, where'd my navigation go? What's happening?
It's not a resize trigger to go back to.
Oh, you know JavaScript, don't you? You're a JavaScript guy, right? Weren't you one that was like, I want to use Node?
No.
No? I like you anyway. Yes, that's what's happening. Right? Navigation. I refresh this page. Look at here, navigation. Display block, because that's what the toggle function is doing. If display none, display block. If display block on the style, display none. Here's what's actually happening. Let me show it to you. It's kind of, just let me do it, please. Here's what's happening. Let me walk you through vanilla JavaScript. How many of you love vanilla JavaScript? sliding menu, pass the object ID, like navigation. Document, dot get element by ID, navigation, dot style. Dot style, style property on the element. If this menu, meaning whatever ID you just got, dot display, the style property of display, is equal to block, then when this function is triggered on click, change it to display none. Else, if it's none, trigger it to display block. That's what's happening, okay? That's what the toggle function is doing, okay? Display block, display none. It is still set to display none because I've told it to display none. So what happens if you want it to reappear? Again, how many of you are afraid to write your own JavaScript? How many of you are afraid to write your own code? To make it, you need to write your own code, right? So you need to write on a piece of paper. What's happening here? Well, I click this, and it opens. I click it again, it closes. So if it's closed, I'm clicking it and it's opening. If it's open and I'm clicking it, it's closed. If none, click block. If block, click none. Okay, in jQuery, that's the toggle function, right? If we resize the window,
Don't toggle it, but set it as.
if we resize the window,
Check if it's a block, set it as a block.
right? If it's display none, set it as block. Those are when they say programming is a bunch of directions or instructions, that's all it is. I thought to myself when Simon from Linda told me that, it can't be that easy, right? You know, the English guy, yeah, right? I mean, I knew it well before that, but that's just the example. It is. Start with that immediate instruction. If it's hidden, display it. If it's displayed, hide it. Start there. Then start adding on to that. So, window, on load, anonymous function. When you click toggle, perform the slide toggle function on navigation. Disable the href on anchor tags. If the window's inner width is less than 801, make sure it's hidden. Else, if it's bigger than 801, show it. Window.resize. Then along comes iOS 8 on the iPhone, and they trigger a resize event when you vertically scroll. God damn it, you guys. Okay, so I had to solve that problem. Let's load the window.innerWidth as a variable. Okay, so if the load width is not equal to inner width, in other words, trigger for width only, show it greater than 800, hide it less than 800. They didn't do that here. Oops. From there, what if you have, whoops, I'm almost done, you guys. Just grant me this. From there, again, so show, toggle, 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 toggle. What about if you have these that have children? Same thing, right? Except for all these sub-navigation items. If you're in WordPress, they all have the same class name. Menu item, or excuse me, submenu. So how do I get one submenu at a time and not all of them? Correct. Did everybody just understand that?
No.
Using the this selector. When I click the sub-toggle little icon, right? Slide toggle the submenu, but only the next one after that. This is how you translate pseudocode into real code. You have to describe the condition of what's happening and give the machine instructions to perform a task given those conditions. Right there, that's all there is to programming.
The jQuery ones, is like crazy.
Yeah. Did that make sense at all?
Yes.
Here's what happens in the WordPress class. People use those, I found this CSS menu, this slick nav menu, whatever. And then they get into the WordPress class and they have to parse IDs and classes and their slick nav, and CSS menu breaks. Who do they come to help them fix it? This guy. What does this guy say? How does it work? What does the student say? I don't know. Why? Because I just copied and pasted it. Then I can't help you. Right? You got to know how it works for me to help you. If you have a specific question, this is happening when I click this, what's going on? Versus how come this thing I copied and pasted, I can't get the classes and IDs to work? How do I get that drop-down menu to work? Do you know how drop-down menu works? No. Why? Because I copied and pasted it. You have to start writing this yourself. Otherwise, you are not going to make it. I'll just say it like that. I don't mean to scare you guys, but that's just the plain truth. If you want to make it out there as a developer, you have to take itty-bitty solutions, problems like that. And again, start. If I click this, I want it to open. If I click this, I want it to close. Well, what's actually happening? Oh, I want it to open if it's closed. I want it to close if it's open. So if it's open, click close. If it's closed, click open. Oh, I can program that. Then what's the next condition? What's the next bug in the machine? Let's solve that. What's the next scenario that I want it to do after that? Let's add that into it. And pretty soon you're going to have kind of wild spaghetti code that you can then manage and clean up a little bit. But it all starts right there. Make sense? I hate when I see you guys having this slick nav CSS menu stuff that you didn't write yourself, and then you don't know how it works, and then when you get into the WordPress class, it breaks, and you don't know how to fix it. Because all it is finding the right class name and whatnot, and doing the hover stuff. But if you don't know how to do that, yeah, you know. Huh? Well, it just, again, a little bit of me dies inside when you come to me and say, I don't know how to do this. When that knowing how to do that should have been a prereq. That makes sense. I've got a pile of your stuff. Right? I've got stuff. Yeah.
I'll stay with you today.
All right. The moral of this story is write your own damn code.